Now, let me come to George. George, you have a huge background and experience in United Nations Development Program, UNDP. Where, in your view, is COVID-19 threatening to reverse the progress made on the Sustainable Development Goals? And where does the UNDP have the greatest leverage in accelerating the implementation of the SDGs in the rest of the world and South Asia in particular?
Thank you very much for the question, Mahendra, and I'm delighted to be here today to speak to you all. The global pandemic is changing everybody's lives, but its socio-economic and health impacts will be felt differently across countries depending on their underlying economic, governance, and democratic structures. Most countries are facing grim trade-offs between livelihoods and lives as they aim to mitigate the spread and impact of the COVID-19 crisis. And 2 out of 3 COVID-19 deaths are happening in developing countries. Global human development, which is UNDP's combined measure of education, health, and living standards, is on course to decline for the first time since 1990. These impacts are already being deeply felt. Poverty levels and inequalities are widening. This story is not new. The poorest are the hardest hit by the health impacts and the least able to cope with economic shocks. Worldwide, women, low-waged, informal workers, migrants, and refugees are some of the hardest hit by the losses of income. In developing countries, vast majority of informal workers are women. UNDP and Oxford University estimate over 1.3 billion are living in multidimensional poverty. 661 million are in the Asian Pacific region. South Asia alone shares more than 41% of the total number of dimensional poor. And despite India's significant progress, it accounts for 28% of the 1.3 billion multidimensional poor. 4 in 10 people in South Asia still lack access to sanitation facilities. And the poorest communities remain the most vulnerable to climate change. They're more exposed to droughts for warming scenarios above the 1.5 Celsius rise in temperature in several countries in Asia, which has not made enough progress on climate action. The World Food Programme predicts that 265 million people in low or lower middle income countries will suffer from acute hunger by the end of the year. In addition, the ILO has warned that COVID-19 threatens the livelihoods of nearly half of the global workforce. That's 1.6 billion workers. Informal workers, estimated at 1.3 billion people, 2/3 of the workforce in the Asian Pacific, are expected to be hardest hit. And ILO further added that they expect a devastating 17.3% loss in working hours globally in the second quarter of 2020. That's the equivalent of 495 million jobs, 265 million of which are in Asia and the Pacific. Now, turning to business in particular, many multinational enterprises have warned of earnings shortfalls and postponed their investment plans for 2020. Foreign direct investment will fall by 45% in this region. A global economic recession will further weigh on inflows and outflows to the region, whereas economic growth in Asia is expected to stall at 0% in 2020. Job losses in Vietnam are estimated at 820,000 people. In Cambodia, Bangladesh, and Myanmar, small garment factories are closing down, shedding jobs that were mostly held by women and are crucial for providing incomes to the near poor. Small and medium enterprises are especially vulnerable given their limited resources and access to credit. In the Asia and Pacific, SMEs account for more than 96% of all businesses and for 2/3 of private sector jobs. Countries will not be able to recover economically without a plan to mitigate the losses of SMEs. Turning to international trade, about 2/3 of the international trade takes place within global value chains. The recovery of many countries in this region and others outside will depend directly on the rapid recovery of the Chinese economy. Now, whilst travel, tourism, hospitality, other transport and logistics sectors have been badly affected, other sectors have ridden the wave and have actually benefited from COVID-19. The pandemic increased demand for medical and healthcare services, for web-based services such as e-commerce, online education, food delivery, opening opportunities for other industries. And more importantly, those industries that have already digitized are better able to reap the benefits. Now, turning to your second part of the question, recovery will be a long process. To help, UNDP and its UN partners have facilitated the preparation of countries' socio-economic impact assessments. They're offering useful guidance on potential policy interventions to mitigate the impact and to build back better. Governments are making urgent decisions now which will have serious implications for meeting the goals. These decisions include providing healthcare services, expanding social protection and basic services, protecting jobs, small and medium enterprises and supply chains, making fiscal and financial resources available for the response, and strengthening social cohesion and community action. UNDP proposes 3 interconnected pillars of action to help countries support a recovery and get back on track to achieve the SDGs. The first of those pillars is people-centered development. It's essential to tackle poverty and inequalities in the region by ensuring that the recovery plans, including fiscal stimulus and packages, target the poorest and most vulnerable groups. That will require investments in social protection schemes, particularly for those who are uncovered and those in the informal sector. Boosting investment in sectors which will generate the highest returns in terms of job creation, investing in SMEs to help them recover and generate needed jobs. Secondly, green recovery, to accelerate decarbonisation and support nature-friendly businesses. And third, capitalising on the 4th industrial revolution and digital transformation. Thank you.
So, thank you, George. That is quite exhaustive and comprehensive. But since there are a large number of corporate Asia's leaders, business leaders are joining this roundtable, let me ask you, how can businesses move to change their contribution from mere add-on or nice-to-do projects to truly transforming their core business mission and strategy into one that realizes the SDGs in the transparent and accountable way? And how does UNDP contribute to monitor the full business impact, both positive and negative, on the SDGs?
Thank you, Mahendra. The Sustainable Development Goals offer a blueprint for businesses to profitably solve the problems of people and planet, to generate opportunities that enhance business growth and long-term competitiveness. This means using the SDGs to guide business strategies by internally challenging how a business generates value, how it innovates, who it employs, how it raises finance, what it consumes, and how it benefits society at large. This fundamental alignment helps transform business models towards sustainability. Now, looking at some of my fellow panelists, and many of us were trained at a time when the prevailing business philosophy was to deliver wealth to shareholders, full stop. Now businesses are raison d'etre to value creation for customers, stakeholders and society, and not just shareholders. This is a focus on purpose and not CSR. I could perhaps paraphrase this as being more Mervyn King than Jack Welch. It involves reassessing value creation in the context of a rapidly changing world with expectations on societal and environmental responsibility. Now, those businesses that don't adapt will face major challenges, falling brand loyalty amongst their customer base, as millennials and Gen Z have different value structures than perhaps our generation. A more hostile regulatory environment as environmental protection and other SDG aspirations become codified in law, increased risk of litigation, and strengthened corporate reporting standards that highlight sustainability weaknesses. And this brings me to transparency and accountability. Businesses need to not only think about value creation for all constituents, but also communicate this through their corporate reports. Corporate reporting today is not fit for purpose. To regain trust, transparent reporting is needed on value creation, risk, sustainability, environmental, social, and governance factors. And as Mervyn King has already said today, there is hope, and the recent announcement for a shared vision for a comprehensive, globally accepted corporate reporting system based around integrated reporting offers hope for the future and a way forward to achieve this. Now, although more investors and enterprises are aligning their activities to the SDGs, current levels of investment are insufficient. Just to give you an illustration, as of 2019, only 1% of enterprises that referred to the SDGs in their corporate reports were tracking their progress. UNDP contributes to this by working with partners to focus on 3 areas to overcome barriers and make it easier for businesses to impact the SDGs. This includes 3, Sdg Impact Management. This is a means to make better decisions that drive investment capital to where it's needed. And it comprises practice assurance standards, the Sdg Impact Seal, and impact management education. Secondly, Sdg Impact Intelligence. This is producing data and insights needed for increasing financial flows to the SDGs, comprising Sdg investor maps of investment business models. And lastly, Sdg Impact Facilitation. This is where we've tried to foster matchmaking and collaboration, realizing investments, focusing on investor and policy dialogue. This draws on the UN presidents in over 170 countries, deep sustainable development expertise, and relationships with governments and other influencers. To give some examples, UNDP is working with financial intermediaries and private investors in places such as Bangladesh, India, Cambodia, and Hong Kong to push forward efforts that channel more private money into so-called impact investment projects. And there's plenty of opportunity. If we think of the massive increases in social bonds, which jumped by 285% last year to 9.2 billion. Sustainability bonds, which rose by 76% to $9 billion, which builds upon the coattails, as HSB have said, on the success of green bonds that bring environmental benefits. And according to Capgemini's latest World Wealth Report, about 16.5 million high net worth individuals, that's those with 1 million or more to invest globally, had a combined wealth of 63.5 trillion, a third of which belongs to this region in the Asia Pacific. So there's actually great opportunity here, and I really hope that working together collaboratively, we can capture that value. Thank you.
So thank you, George. I think 2 important messages, that to mitigate impact and rebuild better, that's very, very important and faster. And the second one for the private sectors, SDG Impact Managing, SDG Impact Intelligence, SDG Impact Facilitation. And UNDP has a very well-developed framework for this. Thank you for that.